Rain didn't fall that night. It bled from the heavens. Each drop sliced through the darkness like a memory refusing to die. The city below glimmered beneath the storm, its neon veins pulsing gold and crimson across the wet streets. Somewhere within that endless heartbeat of thunder sat a woman. Isabella Cruz. Her mascara had melted into the rain. Her lips trembled with a taste of salt and blood. A bruise bloomed beneath her collarbone, shaped like the hand of a man who had mistaken power for love. The strap of her red dress hung loose, her little pearl earring missing. She didn't move. She only stared at her reflection in a puddle that distorted her face, as if even the water didn't want to remember her pain. Then came the sound, low, steady, deadly. A black car slowed beside her, its headlights carving two white scars across the night. The tinted window rolled down, revealing the eyes of a man whose name traveled through the underworld like a rumor no one dared to confirm. Alejandro Morales. He was the kind of man whose silence meant more than another man's confession. The city feared him, not for what he did, but for how calmly he did it. Yet when he saw her sitting there, broken, wet, trembling, something inside him cracked. He had seen her before, in the small cafe near the old harbor, always reading the same book with a blue ribbon tucked between its pages. She was a quiet light in a city built on violence, and for reasons he never tried to explain. He'd always slowed his car when passing that cafe, just to catch a glimpse of her through the rain. Tonight, the light had fallen. He stepped out of the car, the rain plastering his black shirt to his chest, his shoes sinking slightly into the puddles. He didn't speak at first. He only watched her, long enough for the thunder to pause, long enough for the storm to hold its breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was low enough to cut through the rain. "Whoever did this to you," he murmured, "will not see another sunrise." Isabella looked up, her vision blurring between tears and water. The shape before her was shadow and power and danger, and yet his tone held something heartbreakingly human. "You shouldn't," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm trouble." He knelt, his eyes softening. "So am I." He removed his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric was heavy, warm, smelling faintly of smoke and rain and something old, like regret. When he helped her into the car, she didn't resist. She only looked at him one last time through the glass as the city blurred behind them, a woman with nothing left, and a man who had everything but peace. At the Morales estate, silence ruled. The gates groaned open like a warning, revealing marble steps gleaming under lightning. His men, killers loyal to the bone, froze when they saw him carrying a woman in his arms. No one had ever seen Alejandro bring someone home. Not a friend. Not a lover. Not even a corpse. He laid her gently on the couch, then turned to his men. His voice calm but edged with threat. "Find the one who touched her." "Boss," one of them stammered. "Who is she?" Alejandro's eyes flickered with something that almost looked like pain. "She's the reason you're all still breathing. Move." Within an hour, a private doctor arrived. He stitched her lip, cleaned her wounds, and left quietly. Not daring to ask questions. When the door closed, Alejandro stood by the window, lighting a cigarette with hands that trembled for the first time in years. Smoke curled through the air like ghosts rising from the past. He stared at her, asleep, fragile, her hair spilling across the pillow like ink. Miguel, his right-hand man, entered. "Boss, we found him. Her boyfriend, or whatever's left of him. Works under the Russians. Wants money, got temper. Should I?" Alejandro turned. His eyes, sharp as broken glass, met Miguel's. "No. Bring him in." Miguel froze. "Alive. Alive," Alejandro said, exhaling smoke. "I want to look him in the eye." 2 hours later, the rain hadn't stopped. Then a warehouse on the edge of the city. Chains rattled as a man cried for mercy. The Russians had fled the scene, leaving one behind. Rafael, Isabella's abuser, was tied to a chair, blood dripping from his nose. His eyes swollen with fear. Alejandro walked in slow, no shouting. No theatrics. Just silence and rain outside tapping against the tin roof. Rafael looked up, shaking. "Please," she lied. "She." A hand cut him off, not with a slap but a gesture. Alejandro's hand raised slightly as if stopping time itself. "I'm not here for stories," he said. I'm here for truth. Raphael's lip quivered. I didn't mean to hurt her. You did. Alejandro's voice was calm. Too calm. But I'm not going to kill you. Raphael blinked in disbelief. You're not. Alejandro leaned forward, his breath slow, his tone almost a whisper. Because if I kill you, she remembers pain. If I let you live, she learns peace. He stood, buttoned his coat, and turned toward the door. Miguel's eyes widened. Boss, we can't just... Let him go, Alejandro interrupted. He's already dead to her. That's enough. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Inside, Raphael wept. Not from mercy, but from the realization that forgiveness from a man like Alejandro Morales felt heavier than any bullet. That night, Alejandro sat by Isabella's bedside. She woke, half dreaming, half terrified, and found him there, the man whose name made entire streets go quiet. What did you do? She asked softly. He smiled, the kind of smile that hurt to see. I forgave him. She blinked. Why? He looked away, his cigarette burning low. Because you deserve a world where revenge doesn't win. And for the first time, the man the city called El Diablo looked human. Broken, tired, but finally at peace with one good thing he couldn't destroy. The city woke with the rain, but inside the Morales mansion, time had stopped. Days passed quietly. Too quietly for a place that once echoed with orders and gunfire. Alejandro no longer barked commands through the hallways or slammed doors that frightened his men into silence. He spent mornings in the sunroom, the one he hadn't entered in years, just watching Isabella. She moved through the house like a melody he'd forgotten the words to, barefoot, gentle, leaving traces of warmth on cold marble floors. Sometimes she hummed softly as she poured tea, and he found himself listening, not to her voice, but to what it did to his silence. The men whispered when he passed. El Diablo has changed. They didn't understand. Neither did he. The first time she smiled again, he was painting. No one knew Alejandro Morales could paint. There was a room upstairs filled with canvases, old, cracked, covered in dust, a secret life abandoned when violence became easier than color. He picked up a brush again one morning, sitting before a blank canvas as if it were a confession booth. Isabella entered, holding a cup of coffee. Her laughter, soft but real, broke the quiet. You're terrible at this, she teased, watching the uneven stroke of a flower that looked more like a shadow. Alejandro looked up. I'm out of practice. Then keep practicing, she said, her eyes warm. You can't unlearn peace. You just forget how to hold it. He didn't know how to answer that. But that night, he painted until dawn. Miguel watched him from a distance, worried. Boss, he said one evening, the Russians are watching again. You let Raphael live. Now they think you've gone soft. Alejandro exhaled smoke through the open balcony door. Let them think that. Peace doesn't work in our world, Miguel said quietly. Alejandro turned, eyes unreadable. Then I'll build a new one. Miguel shook his head. And what happens when they burn it down? Alejandro looked toward the garden, where Isabella was laughing at the housekeeper's cat chasing butterflies. Then we rebuild again. The mansion changed with her. Where there were once guards and shadows, there were flowers and sunlight. She planted roses near the gate. Red ones, the color of old blood turning into something beautiful. She said every flower needed both water and scars to bloom. Night, when the city lights flickered in the distance, she read aloud to him. Stories about love and forgiveness. He listened with his eyes closed. Her voice washing over him like the sea over old stones. He began sleeping again, not the restless half-sleep of killers, but real sleep, the kind that comes only when the soul has stopped running. But the world outside didn't sleep. Forgiveness in the underworld was weakness, and weakness was blood. The Russians saw his silence as invitation. Petrov, Raphael's employer, ruthless and proud, wanted to reclaim his reputation. One evening, under the hum of neon signs and rain-slicked streets, he gathered his men. Morales has forgotten who he is, Petrov sneered, tapping ash from his cigar. Let's remind him. The reminder came on a quiet afternoon. Isabella was in her new flower shop, La Vida and Flor, the one Alejandro had bought her as a gift. It smelled of lavender and white lilies, soft music playing from an old radio. She was arranging tulips when she noticed the reflection in the glass. A man standing outside, watching. He smiled. Too calm. Too cold. Then another shadow joined him. Then 3 more. The sound of shattering glass came before the scream. Inside the mansion, Miguel burst into Alejandro's office. "Boss!" The shop. But Alejandro was already on his feet, gun holstered, his coat swinging over his shoulders. The calm that had once made him dangerous returned, not from rage, but from love twisted into something sharp. When he arrived, the shop was unrecognizable, broken petals, torn curtains, blood on the floor, and silence. Only her scarf remained, the small blue one he had seen the first day at the cafe. Lying in a pool of rainwater, he picked it up slowly, pressing it to his lips for a long time. He said nothing then. "Burn this city if we must." Miguel's heart sank. "Boss, find them." His voice was cold, almost kind. "But no one dies. Not unless they make me forget her again." That night, he sat in his office, staring at the window. Rain traced thin rivers down the glass. Below, the city moved. Alive, blind, sinful. He poured whiskey into a glass but never drank it. The ice melted slowly, like time itself refusing to pass. When Miguel entered, he carried a file. "Petrov took her. Toward the docks. He's waiting for you." Alejandro didn't turn around. "Good. Boss, what's the plan?" Alejandro's reflection in the glass smiled faintly. "To forgive the devil one last time." In the warehouse by the port, Isabella awoke to darkness. Her wrists burned from the ropes. She could hear men laughing, talking about money, revenge, and the soft Morales. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for him. Outside, engines roared, the air shifted, the storm had found them. By the time Petrov realized what was happening, it was too late. Explosions lit up the dockyard. The sky turned orange with fire and vengeance. Alejandro's men moved like ghosts through the chaos, but he walked alone, gun in hand, his steps slow, deliberate. He wasn't there to destroy, he was there to end. Petrov waited inside an old cargo warehouse, smiling. "Morales, you came for your flower." Alejandro entered the light. "I came for peace." Petrov smirked. "Then you came to the wrong place." Alejandro's tone didn't change. "No. I brought it with me." He raised his gun but not to shoot. He threw it aside. Petrov blinked. "What game are you playing?" Alejandro stepped forward, unarmed, unshaken. "Forgiveness," he said quietly, "is the only thing you can't steal." Petrov's smile faltered. "You think you can forgive me?" Alejandro's eyes softened. "No. But I can forgive myself for ever becoming you." Petrov lifted his gun. The shot echoed. The gunshot tore through the night. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Petrov's bullet hit, but not where he aimed. Alejandro had moved fast, a ghost in the firelight. The bullet grazed his side, tearing through his coat, and in that flash of pain he saw her. Isabella, tied to a chair at the edge of the room, her eyes wide, her lips trembling around a gag. He stumbled but didn't fall. Pain didn't matter anymore. Only her did. "Let her go," Alejandro said, voice quiet but sharp enough to slice the air. Petrov's laughter filled the warehouse. "You came unarmed, Morales. Do you think love makes you immortal?" Alejandro took another step forward, ignoring the blood soaking through his shirt. "No," he said, eyes locked on Isabella. "It makes me real." Outside, the docks burned. Miguel and the men fought through the Russians, trying to reach their boss. But inside, it was just the 3 of them. Alejandro, Isabella, and Petrov, trapped in a world painted by fire. Petrov pressed his gun to Isabella's temple. "You think you can forgive this?" he hissed. Alejandro's tone didn't break. "I already have." And then, in a voice calm enough to frighten even the devil, "But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll let you walk away." Petrov sneered. "Then what will you do, Saint?" Alejandro smiled faintly, blood glinting at the corner of his mouth. "I'll let fate decide." In one swift motion he lunged. Not for Petrov but for Isabella. He pulled her down, twisting his body to shield hers just as the gun fired. The bullet found him. This time deep, cruel, final. Petrov stumbled backward as Miguel's men burst through the doors, gunfire filling the air like thunder's revenge. Within seconds Petrov fell, not by Alejandro's hand, but by the echo of his command. Silence returned, broken only by the rain leaking through the shattered roof. Isabella held him, her fingers trembling, blood staining her white dress. "No," she whispered. "No, please, not like this." Alejandro smiled, a slow, fragile curve of lips that carried the weight of a lifetime. "Sure," he murmured, voice fading. "It's all right. It had to end somewhere peaceful." Tears fell onto his face, warm against the cold rain. "You promised we'd start over," she said through sobs. He looked at her, really looked, one last time. "I did," he whispered. "And we did." Her breath caught. "Please don't go." His hand brushed against her cheek. "You showed me something no one ever dared to give a man like me," he said weakly. "A reason to stop killing." She shook her head. "You can't leave me." He coughed, blood spilling from his lips. "Isabella, listen." His eyes, fading but still fierce, locked onto hers. "Promise me, you'll forgive them too." He stared, heartbreaking. "I can't." He smiled faintly. "Then forgive me instead." And with that, Alejandro Morales, the man the city once called El Diablo, exhaled his last breath, not in anger but in love. Dawn arrived like an apology. The rain stopped. Smoke drifted upward from the ruins of the dockyard. Miguel stood outside, watching as Isabella emerged. Her hands covered in blood but her eyes dry. Empty, yet burning with quiet fire, she carried his jacket, the same one he'd wrapped around her the night they met. She didn't say a word. Miguel bowed his head. "He died protecting you." She looked at him. Her voice was steady, hauntingly calm. "No," she said. "He died forgiving them." Weeks passed. Then months. The mansion became something else. Gone were the guards, the guns, the whispers. Isabella turned it into a shelter, a sanctuary for women who had been hurt, forgotten, or left behind. She called it El Jardín de Alejandro, Alejandro's garden. Each morning she planted new flowers in the courtyard. Roses, tulips, sunflowers, things that would outlive the memory of blood. People said the mansion was haunted, but in a kind way, that on nights when it rained, you could see him sitting by the window, smoking quietly, watching over her. On the anniversary of his death, Isabella returned to the pier. The sea was calm, painted silver by the moon there, standing at the edge of the water was a statue, bronze, strong, facing the horizon. His face. His name unmarked. She placed a single white rose at its feet and whispered, "You were right, mi amor. Revenge dies fast. But love doesn't." She closed her eyes and for a moment she could feel him again, not in the wind, not in the rain, but in her heartbeat. Every beat said his name. Every breath carried his memory. The tide rose, touching her shoes. The world was quiet. Then, far away, thunder, soft, distant, like an echo of his voice. "Whoever hurt you, died that night. Whoever loved you, still lives inside you." A tear fell, but it wasn't sorrow anymore. It was peace. Isabella smiled through it, looking up at the dark sky. "I forgive them," she whispered. "All of them." And somewhere, maybe in heaven, maybe in the storm, Alejandro Morales smiled too.